Don't be shy. Go ahead and raise your hand. And Al looks like she's got her hand raised. Or maybe not. Okay.
No, should I try to unraise my hand? No,
you're good.
Okay, I'll be just interpreting along with Deb, but thanks for checking in, Steve. I appreciate it.
Just a reminder that
scrolling through I was just scrolling through all the images of everybody. I don't see anyone raising their hand, so if there's no pressing questions that you may have at this time, I think we can get into the engagement questions. And I'm hopeful that we'll have some good discussion and comments for the department and the Ocean Protection Council, because all the information that you provide will just help us make an enhanced report that everyone can appreciate and use to move management of the network forward. So,
Steve, yes, thanks so much. I actually did receive a question via chat, and I'll read it out loud here and then turn it over to agency folk to respond. And the question is, are there any plans to expand MPAs with the potential findings from the 2022-23 review? Or is expansion on MPAs part of the review process?
Great, that's a great question. And that is not part of the process. I mean, we'll be conducting an evaluation of the performance of the network, as Becky mentioned, to meet the goals. And based on what the data says, there could be recommendations, but that's not the focus of the review. The review is to look at all the data from all the various monitoring programs, the socioeconomic data, and that'll help inform whether the network is functioning as designed. That could be an outcome, a recommendation, but that is not the intent of the review. The review is to identify shortcomings and the achievements of the network achieving the goals of the Marine Life Protection Act.
Any other general questions before we turn it over and ask questions of all of you? Okay, well, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Please feel free to pop in as we go with additional questions. And let's see here, I'm gonna share the screen now.
We do have some questions that I've received actually on the chat, so
thanks so much.
Go for it. Okay, I'm gonna read this out loud here. So we have a question. Becky Oda touched quickly on the fact that the purpose of the review is not to entertain specific MPA site change requests from stakeholders. How are you directing stakeholders who have those types of ideas to share?
Great, that's another good question. Any questions like that can be directed to the Fish and Game Commission. On their website, you can send a petition in for any type of change you'd like to see regarding wildlife and marine resource management. That is the best way to get it in. If you do have a comment and you have information that you would like the department to review, you can also submit it to our webpage or email address. It's been shared several times, and it's called MPA Management Review. We'll be capturing all those types of comments, and they'll be part of our report as an appendix. And so the commission will have all those types of questions or concerns or recommendations people have at their fingertips when the report's submitted. It's good when you do have a recommendation that you would like to see a particular action take place. If you have substantial information or something to support that idea, that really helps. But the concept can be taken up by the commission, and they could direct the department and its partners to pursue the recommendation. So I guess I want to say you don't have to have the data, but it also helps to substantiate the recommendation.
Great, and then there's one more question here, which this might actually tie into one of the questions that has been posed to this group. So it could be a good place for us to start. The question that it ties into is the areas of highest priority topics and issues and other sources of information that should be considered in the Decadal Management Review. So maybe if we want to start there, that could be a good place for us to start, because somebody wrote into the chat here that they're interested in the results of monitoring, of the monitoring program, in particular trends over time, including sea level rise, ocean warming, ocean acidification, and other climate change effects. So if you want to speak to that for just a moment, Steve, that would be great.
Great. So I think I heard you say you were punting that to me, but we'd probably start in that section. But yeah, as Becky said, it's amazing. It's unprecedented. So following implementation of each of the regions, baseline monitoring was done to characterize the biological and socioeconomic conditions at the time and some oceanographic data. Since then, and reports were written, and we can make the link to those reports available to you all. Long-term monitoring was conducted starting in 2016. And those reports are just now being written up, and they'll be available for public review in probably late January. And that'll look at the baseline and compare that information to the long-term monitoring data. So that'll give you an idea of what type of trends are occurring, whether there's been change or no change at all. And to kick it up a couple notches, the Ocean Protection Council has funded the National Center for Ecological Assessment, and got the last part of the acronym, but they're essentially going to take all that data and integrate it across all of the habitats. So that's really exciting, but that information will not be available almost till December of next year. In addition to those long-term monitoring projects, the Integrated Ocean Observing Systems program is looking at all sorts of environmental data, such as HAB events, being able to predict them through models, sea surface temperature, ocean acidification, things like that will also be integrated into this report. So we're really excited to see that information. But as it becomes available, we'll be sending out notices to everyone who's on our listserv, plus at the Marine Resources Committee meetings, at the commission meetings, OPC staff will be having their council announce these types of things moving through time. So we're going to try to keep everyone as informed as possible as these reports become available. And I don't know if I went off script on what that question was, but that's. I
think it was really helpful, Steve. And since we're moving on into these questions, what I'll do is share my screen now. Don't want to alarm anyone, but we're going to stop seeing everyone's face. We'll start seeing the screen, and y'all can watch me stumble along with my typos and my note taking. So here we go. How's that? Can folks see what we've got going on over here?
Yep, we can see it.
Wonderful.
If you could
so
maybe make the size just a little bit bigger of the font so people can follow along. Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's focus here on this first question. What are your highest priority topics and issues and sources of information that should be considered in the Decadal Management Review?
Feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourself, or you can type it into the chat.
Yeah, Dave. You're on mute.
I participated last week as a consumptive member and did have a number of questions, but I'm representing the Sea Urchin Commission, which is a government agency under Food and Ag. And I wanted to know if there's some advice on representation of a government organization versus individuals or trade groups or businesses. Is there any different process, or is it the same? And then if it's the same, I can repeat some of the things I brought up at the last meeting or not.
It's the same. There's no differentiation, so that's not a problem.
Okay.
I will say, Dave, that we have the notes from the previous meeting. So if if you have new things to share, then that would be excellent for this meeting now, because we did capture your previous comments in the last meeting.
Okay, then if I brought them up before, I'll leave those on the record.
Great.
I'm sure you must have another one, Dave.
I'm sure I do, but I have to give it some thought. But it's, I'll let somebody else speak. See, hear some other ideas.
Great. Dana?
Sure. My name is Dana Murray. I'm a marine scientist, environmental manager with the City of Manhattan Beach. A couple areas that I would like to see would be, just because we've had 2 of them now during this decade, is the impact and potential resiliency of marine life affected by the oil spills. So we could look at both what happened in Refugia, Santa Barbara, and also how it expanded down the coast, and also this more recent one in Huntington Beach down the Orange County and San Diego coasts. Another area I think would be interesting to look at, it's going to mirror what somebody else said, but I'd really like to look at climate change resiliency and the effects of sea level rise, ocean warming, ocean acidification, especially any comparison to control sites that are not marine protected areas versus those inside, and see if there's any changes based on marine life and health. I think I've seen some studies in other parts of the world on marine protected areas and coral reefs, and looking at resiliency of protected areas versus those outside. Another one would be, this would be more on the, it would be looking at the potential impact of ocean desalination projects and once through cooling on marine life and potential, because there's reports on the larval impacts. And so looking at those species compared to adjacent or marine protected areas that are on a similar current to see if there's any effects there. So there's a few for now. I might think of others later. Thank you.
Great. I will say one thing in response is we're very fortunate that we've had these baseline and long-term monitoring projects ongoing where these spills have occurred. And so we definitely have a section in the report about how this ongoing data has helped inform management and help with like natural resource assessment, damages and things like that. So we're excited about that. We had some of the projects that do a lot of the like marine that does the rocky intertidal work. We were able to have them out and help with the more recent oil spills. So that's definitely something that's in our report. And the climate change and resilience, you know, we have the report from the work group that the Ocean Protection Council activated through their science advisory team. Recommendations from there with the NC's information will also be part of our report. This desalination and once through cooling, I don't know specifically if that would be on it, but I'm glad you added that, and if that's something we can consider to get into the report. It's a obviously a big issue for marine resources, so we appreciate that input, Dana.
Thank you. I just thought of one more. It's kind of related. Is what's adjacent onshore and the potential impacts to marine protected areas in the ocean, specifically looking at if there's beach dunes, beach dune restorations, wetlands compared to an urbanized coastline or new development or anything like that, just looking at that difference, especially as it appears many jurisdictions in California and regional entities are looking at more coastal restoration and living shorelines.
Great. Perfect. Thank you for that. Are there more questions on this particular topic? Yeah, Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Sagrath, and I'm with the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary. And there's a few things I thought, and there's a few of us that are here actually from Channel Islands, but I had some comments that I thought would be useful, or I'd like to include. One is that I wanted to reiterate the importance of long-term monitoring. I know that in the when the MPAs were set up, I was doing work in the Philippines, so I was far away. But there was a lot of baseline surveys that were done, but not all of that was maintained through time. But because there's a lot of environmental fluctuation through time, which I think will increase as climate change increases, it is really important, I think, to have many samples through time so that you can see what are anomalies and what are trends. And so I really want to encourage the state to maintain long-term monitoring projects at as many sites as possible, so that we can see what are like the long-term trends versus it happening to be like an El Nino year that we sampled or a marine heat wave when we sampled. And then in addition, over the years, the types of, between a decade ago and now, there's, on the nerdy science side, there's different and better statistics that we can use, but you need to have long-term monitoring data to be able to look at longitudinal change at sites. And I think would help address some of the concerns I've heard in the other meetings about the types of, whether it's like a site-specific effect or an effect of the MPA.
I'm so sorry. I can't hear you. Can you please speak up closer to the microphone?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
And that last,
repeat all that again?
That last point, I got up to important to have many samples through time to differentiate between anomalies and trends. And then it just cut out for me.
Yeah, there was some weird feedback, so I'm not sure what that was. Apologies. I said it's also in the last I've been sitting in some of the other meetings that you've had, and people have often been concerned about whether or not there was going to be conflation between like site-specific trends that and MPA trends. And I think that having longer-term monitoring will of many sites will there's better statistics now than there was 10 years ago, and I think that it'll be easier to tease out what's a site-specific effect versus the effect of the MPAs. If there's the more like longitudinal data sampling that's available, the easier that will be to do.
Great. You know, one thing the National Park Service has offered up their 20 years of kelp forest monitoring data, and we're excited to have that as part of the analysis for Southern California, because the Channel Islands are so unique compared to the mainland. So yeah, we agree, you know, the long-term monitoring is very important, in having data sets like at the Channel Islands is going to be very helpful in our analyses. Spot on.
Yeah, cool. And that's wonderful. That is a really fantastic data set too. And before my current position, I was a postdoc at Stanford, and we have a lot of long-term monitoring set at Hopkins and Monterey as well. So there are other data sets that are available, which I'm happy to talk about more too if that's useful. Another point I wanted to make is is related to fisheries data. The state fisheries data, the fish ticket data for commercial fisheries, does not include any metrics of effort. And so you can't really tease out like how catches are fluctuating through time, because you don't know if people are catching, you know, 1,000 pounds and they're going out fishing for an hour, or if they're going out fishing for 4 weeks to catch that amount. And so if you want to standardize and actually look at trends through time for fisheries data, there has to be a metric of effort to standardize it by. And currently, the state doesn't collect that data for the routine fish ticket data. And that could be a measure like the hours that were fished, that the boat was out. It could also be like the number of people on a boat could be included in that metric. So I think that it would be fairly easy to add 1 or 2 more questions to the fish ticket data that would actually enable a more meaningful look at how the fisheries trends change through time. And that currently just isn't part of the state. The state is a wonderful, wonderful data set, but it doesn't include that. So it's really hard to understand how trends vary through time because there's no effort data to standardize it by?
Yeah, we've heard that loud and clear from several groups, and that was one of the work group recommendations for more spatially explicit information and to be able to address that effort issue. You know, those market receipts were set up for something else historically, and they just haven't caught up with the times. And we have some logbook programs too, and they also are going to need some work, because sometimes they just require recording the fish and game blocks. Some people actually put GPS locations, so that is something internally within the department we're trying to work on. But thank you for making that comment, and it just empowers the effort to get some things changed with that type of fishery dependent data. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to hear that you guys are thinking about that. And then related to that, on the fishing block information, it's kind of related to what you were just talking about, Steve, but it is at a pretty coarse scale. So if you wanted to actually look at the MPAs effects, it's hard to tease apart what's specifically the MPAs versus what is the just the area more generally, because it's pretty coarse. So that having a bit of a finer spatial resolution would be helpful for trying to tease apart effects of the MPAs versus other things. And then I have one more point, which is I know that some of the recommendations that have come out from the reports that have been written, one of them is that it's important to also do a better job of capturing human dimensions more broadly than just fisheries. And so I know that it's on the state's agenda to do, and so, which is great. But I just
do a better job of capturing what? Sorry, I missed.
Oh, sure. Sort of how MPAs are interacting with like human communities, and I said human dimensions, which is sort of a management term, but how they're like, what are the cultural values of the ocean? What are the benefits that people get from going to an MPA that are not related to something that's extractive, but just to the joy of going to the beach or of seeing marine life, as well as culturally important species or other aspects of people's relationship with the ocean.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks.
So we have a couple more things that came through the chat to me. I added them here on the notes, but just want to read it out loud. That also from the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary is that learning from social science information collected over the last 10 years is important for this or any review. More specifically, stakeholder surveys that capture MPA related knowledge, perspectives, and attitude changes over time. So thank you for that comment as well. And then we got another question / also concern from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers that, Steve, could you address if there are any concerns with the ongoing Cholera prolifera infestation in Newport Bay? The site is fairly close to the Crystal Cove SMCA.
Yeah, so good question. There is ongoing monitoring there to keep an eye on it. It's kind of a sticky wicket there because of the dredging, and it could release rhizomes that can spread out with the tidal system and maybe get out of the bay, but we've contracted work to conduct scuba surveys at Crystal Cove to look to see if this pops up there. So it's still high on the department's radar, and we're working with other organizations to track it. But so far, it seems like it's isolated right now where it's at. There have been some pieces that have been found and rolling around in parts of the bay, but there's ongoing efforts to track that. And if you give me your contact information, I can get you detailed information about that effort, but we are continuing to monitor it, conducting scuba surveys there over the sites and checking the shoreline in the bay. And that other one was a comment, but Amanda could speak about a survey that we would like to roll out that you should look forward to hopefully before Christmas. It'll be out.
Yeah, so the department is trying to work on creating a kind of a stakeholder survey on awareness of marine protected areas. There is going to be a business curated survey that goes out to ocean related businesses, but also a survey that will be rolled out in 2 phases for just more of the general public. The first phase would probably be a little bit more of a concerted focused, people that who would organically go to the department's website, are part of marine protected area collaboratives, anyone who would be in the normal realm of communication, whether it be through listservs or blogs, would probably be notified when this survey is available. And then in a second iteration or second phase of the survey, we would contract out a survey contact business where we can send it to the general public as a whole. So then we could have a little bit more of a baseline on what people who are a bit more involved in MPA world know about marine protected areas or use marine protected areas or how they seek them out. And then also just the general public in its entirety. And whether that be coastal Californians or all of California or trying to figure out this specific kind of audience we would send that survey out to. But that is something the department has been working on, making sure that the questions are worded in a way that isn't leading, and it's just really meant to help us get a better understanding of who and how people are using or even aware of the marine protected area.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, and I also got a question sent to me, and it looks like I believe Jocelyn might have moved it under this new italicized category of how you would define, measure, and or assess progress towards the Marine Life Protection Act goals. And so I received a question if anyone in this group has a sense of how well the MPAs are currently performing in the South Coast region. So if you'd like to answer that, Steve, feel free, or I can continue just talking.
Yeah, there are definite trends, like at the Channel Islands, more of the historical marine protected areas that have been in for a long time that were no take. We're seeing anecdotally right now as they're going through the data as there is a response to them. We're also seeing areas that were heavily fished and then they became a reserve, a greater response rate, a faster response rate from the protection in the newly created reserves. But all that information will come out in the reviews. And I don't know if members of this group on this call have some information from their observations or not, but be fine to bring that up if you like. Okay, let's go to, is there
one more question that just came across, and I'm wondering if this person would like to go ahead and ask it themselves. I will unmute them, give them a few seconds in case.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Jocelyn, and to the group. Really helpful here because I'm learning about the MPA assessment process right now, so it's very helpful. Good timing. Question I have is, with all the work that's going into the 30 by 30 effort, I'd like to be educated a little bit on how this assessment might dovetail with that, or if it does. We're all kind of working on similar things, and it'd just be helpful for me to get a sense of how they are aligned or where they're aligned. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I'll start it off and I can pass it over to Tova from the Ocean Protection Council. But essentially, in one sense, it is aligned in the fact that a little over 16% of the California coastline is in one type of protected area, 9% in the State Marine Reserve. And so with that, in addition to the sanctuaries along the California coastline, other protected areas, national seashores, things like that, all are contributing to trying to achieve the 30% of protection along the coastline. But this review that we're talking about today is insulated or independent of the effort right now running through the Natural Resources Agency on the 3030. So it's kind of, I don't know if you'd call it unfortunate, but they're kind of running parallel to each other. And we understand it's creating some confusion for our partners and stakeholders and interested parties because they seem to be interchangeable. But the current review of our network is insulated from this effort. The only way directly right now that it's connected is this program is contributing to protecting California's coastline. It's an additive effect, but there's no pressure to say we need to have more at this time unless the data says something different. There's no pressure to say, we want you to look at this so you can increase the number of protected areas along the coastline. That is not what we're working on now. And I don't know if you wanted to add a little more to that, feel free.
Sure, I'll just I'll add in the chat actually right now. Whoops. Just a link if you want to get more involved in the California Biodiversity Collaborative. That's going to be the stakeholder process that is going to help inform that 30 by 30 goal. So maybe you're already involved with it. So just wanted to share that resource if there's anyone here who is interested in that. But yes, that collaborative is currently working through the state with an assessment on the amount of protected areas, MPAs, and others, as Steve mentioned, national marine sanctuaries, water quality protections, like the various forms of protections that already exist. They're assessing that and figuring out how much more is left in order to reach that 30% goal.
Very helpful. Thank you.
So we've got a hand raised.
Oh yeah.
We've got a hand raised. It's Giles. Giles, come on across.
All right, thanks very much. Appreciate you taking a question. Doesn't lower my hand. Curious to put a question forward regarding some sort of differentiation amongst aquaculture projects or proposed aquaculture projects between those that might actually provide some sort of like restorative ecosystem function versus those that are sort of purely sort of extractive, if you will, that are growing fish in a pen in the middle of the sea versus say a project where you're growing or you're growing urchins to then remove from a previously kelp dominated ecosystem to bring back kelp cover, and or something specific in the carbon sequestration world that's aimed around kelp reforestation.
Well, within the department, we do have the aquaculture permitting process, which is actually separate from the scientific collecting permit process. So they're kind of two different things. One's more commercial, that's usually going through the aquaculture permitting process. And we do have a lot of scientific studies actually ongoing about using a scientific collecting permit, looking how to maybe restore kelp inside the laboratory and on the coastline. And there's actually, we can put it in the chat. Hopefully, I'm not sure, maybe Amanda might have it, or I can look for it. There's a webinar tomorrow about research on kelp restoration and urchins, and about this department's scientific collecting permit program. So that might provide a little more information for you, but I think that's kind of what you're asking. I don't envision that we would actually add aquaculture to a protected area. There are a couple, Morro Bay, I think, is one where there was pre-existing aquaculture, and they continue in the MIRMA, the State Marine Recreational Management Area. But I wouldn't envision adding aquaculture to any existing MPA, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I think I was thinking more in terms of if an organism was removed from an MPA as part of a restorative project to then be included into, if you took urchins from an urchin barren within an MPA and took them to an aquaculture facility for, post-processing and or sale, would there be restrictions on that sort of thing?
Yeah, there would be some sort of permitting with that, but currently, like within the marine protected areas, until at least we have these evaluation done through 2022, we're not doing any manipulations inside the marine protected areas. There are, as I didn't really elaborate on it, but there are activities going on right now, culling urchins and looking to see if kelp will be restored. And there's some people with ideas like, hey, if you're removing these urchins, I could have a business and I could do this with the urchin and, make use of it. So that's definitely a possibility. And I'm not an expert on our aquaculture permits or leases or things like that, but yeah, there is the potential for that. And there are projects experimenting with that right now, to tell you the truth.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'd love to suggest at this time that we open this question up one more time for a focused discussion here. How would you define, measure, and or assess progress toward Marine Life Protection Act goals? And if folks have anything specific to share there about how they would define, measure, or assess progress, would love to hear that.
This question is really, to help the department when they're writing the Decadal Management Review report to understand what it is that, that the various stakeholders that you all work with or that you represent are interested in knowing what would be successful from these MPAs if they, or what your agency or organization would find to be successful. So that's what this question is really trying to get at, to help us to understand what we should be addressing in that report more specifically.
So if no one has specific thoughts on this question, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. And please feel free to take us back there. Let's go for what role would you like your community to play in the MPA management program moving forward? Just bring this down here. Whoopsie daisy. There we go. What role would you like your community to play in the MPA management program moving forward? A lot of folks in here. Love to understand how you envision being involved and what the ideal future would look like. And seeing Louie raising your hand. Come on across, Louie.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I don't exactly remember what I discussed when I was in the consumptive meeting before, but I would like to see my community, which is the fishing community, both commercial and sport fishing, and what people could call party boats, I heard referenced earlier, to do cooperative science, to somehow be involved, as we have been in some parts, taking scientists out and then working on trying to answer the question, how would you define or access progress? Thank you.
Great, thanks, Louie. And I don't know, it's just one study in particular, but one of our long-term monitoring projects that's looking at the effect of MPAs inside and outside of the reference sites is the California Cooperative Research Project. And they do use what we call officially in the department, commercial passenger fishing vessels or party boats. They charter, it's coming out of, it's actually, the project involves Moss Landing and a bunch of consortium of universities from Humboldt all the way down to UC San Diego, UC Santa Barbara, the Bodega Lab. And essentially they use captain's knowledge and the vessel to take anglers out on trips inside reserves and they're catching fish, looking at catch rates, species community, biomass, things like that, inside the MPAs, and then going to reference sites outside. And it's been a very effective program because they take volunteer anglers out and anyone can get signed up to participate in these surveys, and people get a firsthand chance to see what the densities and composition of fish are like inside the reserves versus outside. So that is one really successful program, and that's one of the long-term monitoring projects that will be in our report. But we also do hear that a lot, and we need to find that bridge. A lot of time we hear from the commercial fishing industry, they want to offer their boat, but we would also like to kick it up a notch and have a sharing of knowledge and help to design studies. That's very open to that. It's just we need to make the bridge. Everyone, we talk the talk, but that's something that does need to happen in the future, but we would like to see something more substantial than my boat's out for charter. You know, whatever the fishery is, lobster, you know, Dungeness crab, or nearshore hook and line, working collaboratively together to solve a question would be a high priority. But yeah, that's a good one. Thanks, Louis.
Yeah, and thank you, Steve. I've been involved with the Pacific Fishery Management Council as a council member, and now working with the Groundfish Advisory System. And excuse me, Gordy. And I do have access to many of those people. Of course, the Sportfish Association of California with Ken Franke, they've done some good work. Tom Matush was the primary person behind the Central California work, and we attempted to add that work to our latest assessments, and we're not able to because it was a data moderate assessment. So we're looking forward to more of that coastwise and hoping to incorporate that into our fishery stock assessment. So yes, great. And if you need contacts, you know, I'm very much involved, and so is Ken Franke and a number of the rest of us. So I appreciate that, Steve. Good work.
Yeah, that's good work of Rick Starr and his crew. It's for, you know, it's kind of intuitive. You'd see change inside the MPAs, but some of the results that they're seeing are just amazing. But we'll have to see the full analysis to see what the results are, you know, across all ecosystems.
Wonderful. And let's see here, Tova, did you want to pop in with this piece you added from the Army Corps about goals?
Sure, I received a chat about the previous question of how would you define, measure, or assess progress towards the MLPA goals. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers says that goals in the program seem to be rather qualitative, and in order to measure progress, quantitative goals would be needed, such as the percent, oops, where did that go? The percent of invasives, or percent of coverage of rocky reef habitat, species richness, etc.
Great question. And that links right back to the work group report that Becky mentioned earlier. They essentially, a group of scientists that are part of the Ocean Protection Council Science Advisory Team, looked at the department's Marine Monitoring Action Plan, which has performance objectives linked to the goals because they are broad. I mean, when you read them, you're like, gee, how are you going to analyze anything? And so we, at the department, working with Ocean Protection Council, had created some initial performance objectives, but this science team, and someone can put the link to the report in the chat, refine those questions to get linked back more specifically to the goals, to be more quantitative instead of qualitative. And so in that report, there is a whole list of scientific questions to try to address those kind of very lofty legislative kind of things, buzzwords, to be able to put some meet on those and be able to actually say something about each one of those. So that is part of our review. We'll be looking at those questions, and part of the NC's work will be also looking at those to integrate those across habitats. And there's a lot of things in there, like earlier, I think it was Jennifer was asking about fisheries questions, and there's specific questions in there about that, on how to address that, those types of information that Jennifer had asked earlier. So it's very comprehensive. It's a rather dense document, but up in the very front of the document, there's a very nice table with the questions, and they prioritize those, and they're linked to each one of the goals as a high priority for the department and one that could be taken on at a later time. And so I highly recommend taking a look at that. But yeah, we are well aware, and that's something we've worried about within the department, and that's why this science team was formed, to objectively come up with practical science questions that can respond to the 6 goals, because they are rather vague. I mean, they sound great, but yeah, now how do you apply science to those? And so we're excited that that work group is formed, and we have those science questions.
Thanks, Steve. Toa, yeah, go for it.
You want me to keep it with it? Okay, so there was another comment back to the role of that you would want your community to play in the MPA management program from Channel Islands, about, I'll just paraphrase it here, that the National Marine Sanctuary has a Sanctuary Advisory Council, and this is true for Channel Islands as well as the other National Marine Sanctuaries. So they would appreciate continued guidance from CDFW for this group to keep providing regular feedback on the implementation of the joint state and federal MPA network at the Channel Islands. And then I added a note here that this could be true for the other ones as well, the other sanctuaries as well.
Yes, that's great. And you know, the department does in the Marine region have staff on there, but if my project, if we get advance notice, we can prepare things or updates as they're being available to whether it's the research advisory panel or the science advisory panel. We can pull something together with enough advanced information. And I did want to get a plug in for the Monterey Bay. I think it's the RAP, the Research Advisory Panel, tomorrow, and we can get that link in the chat. A couple of the long-term monitoring projects, the one I spoke about earlier, the CCFRP project, and then the nearshore kelp scuba survey, which goes out from shore to 30 meters, about 100 feet deep. They will get brief reports about what the trends are in those data. So I recommend checking that out. I think it starts at 9. They have, from I remember on the agenda, there's a little administrative talk, and then the early part of the morning, they go right into some of those summaries. I'm going to be dialing into it because I'm excited to hear what they have to say. So if we can get that in the chat, that would be great. And if you have time tomorrow, I'd recommend kind of whet your appetite. Did we freeze or?
We have one more comment / question here. This one kind of is in the any other reflections or recommendations. So since we're bouncing around between questions, we do have a little under 25 minutes left in this breakout room. Then I'm going to suggest that as you're all thinking about answers to any of these questions that we're asking you, or if you have any additional questions to ask us, you can continue to raise your hand and we can just place them where they belong. And you can raise your hand or you can send them into the chat, whichever is preferable by you. So I'll just read this one as well. So this is on the broader recommendations for MPA management. This person says that I think that there should be updates in the scientific collection permit process. I think scientific collecting permits are too expensive and hard to get. For example, it makes it difficult to have student projects if they do not fall under an existing permit. I think that it would be good to have a science permit that was for partners like government agencies, universities with field stations that are located within MPAs, et cetera. And for those permits to be straightforward to get and free, or at least more on par in price with the recreational fishing permit.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. We will have a section on the scientific collecting permit, and you may know, whoever submitted this comment, that the regulations and the process for scientific collecting permits was updated. I think it was in 2018. The regulations went into effect. But we do have what's called an entity permit, and we do use that permit with, like, NOAA or NEMPS. They typically have multiple scientists working on projects, so they're issued one permit for multiple projects. That's the same. That goes for the same for the universities, like the CCFRP program I spoke about. They would get an entity permit to list the primary PIs on that permit, and so we do have that possibility. So there's an individual permit and there are entity permits. Where it gets kind of crazy is we have some programs where they're volunteer, where they go out to the, like, coastal piers and things like that and collect seawater to help detect HAB events. And they're volunteers, so there's numerous people, volunteers, some stay, some go. And in that type of situation, having an entity permit doesn't work well, because you just cannot list all the people who would be participating, because it changes from season to season or from year to year. But if you did want to have some type of fee change, that's something you could bring up with the department, because that is a department program, and request that the fees be changed. I know that the more recent fee structure was based on feasibility of administrating the program. So I don't know if that would be an option they would consider, but you're always welcome to bring it up with the department, and that can be discussed through that process, through open door process. And I would say, I don't know if you're familiar with whoever provided this question, there are two types of permits. There's a general permit, which is cheaper than what's called a specific use permit. And if you wanted to do research in a marine protected area, you do have to get a specific use permit, and there are more stringent review of that type of permit because it is in a marine protected area. But thanks for that question. And part of tomorrow's discussion, I met a lot of meetings tomorrow. I mentioned that there's this kelp and urchin restoration. Part of that is going to be scientific collecting permits. And I think I saw that link in the chat a few minutes, about a little while ago. I recommend you listen to that to learn more about the scientific collecting permit program. And I actually am responsible for that program, and Laura Sladoff will be making a presentation. If you have additional questions, you could follow up with her after that, that meeting. She's our marine lead for scientific collecting permit.
I saw Dave's hand was raised. So before we get to you, Dave, I just want to check in with Amanda and see if she had anyone from the chat write to her directly, or Jocelyn.
I have not.
No. Okay. So we'll go to Dave next, and then maybe Sean Hastings is wanting to say something. Not sure if that was a hand raise or not. Sean, go ahead, Dave.
So Steve, yeah, I'm glad I dialed in today, because I do want to participate in that meeting tomorrow, and I had not heard about it. Right, I brought some of those issues up at the consumptive meeting, but I hadn't heard anything about this meeting until today. So I'm glad it came up today, and I will participate. I'm also sending word out to other members of the California Sea Urchin Commission, so we can participate also tomorrow.
Great. Yeah, you know, it's especially the process we're in here, and we try to be as inclusive as possible, and a lot, you know, sometimes these don't reach everybody, but meetings like this do help us share additional tangential information. So I'm glad that you're able to share that, Dave, with your committee and members. That's great. And
so I don't have
a question.
I don't have anybody else in the chat. If I have not read your question out loud yet, then it didn't come through on my side. So if you do have any questions or comments for any of these categories, again, please raise your hand or send it through the chat.
I also want to say if something comes later, that Decadal Management Review email has been shared multiple times in the chat here. It was also in the presentation, but it's Decadal Management or MPA Management Review at wildlife.ca.gov. So if after this you're percolating and something comes up, feel free to send any sort of comment to that email as well.
Yeah, I would just say, you know, the department's our responsibility to report out on the functionality of the network and the program, but I say we, all of us, you know, citizens of California, receiving your input through the process doesn't have to be right now. You know, you might be thinking after the call, get some brainstorming ideas. We welcome them because we'd rather hear about them now and think about how to address them and where we can incorporate them into the report, you know, rather than maybe at the last minute. Of course, that's possible too, and that's fine. But, you know, brainstorming now with you all is very important, and we appreciate, you know, the input you have. And as Amanda mentioned, the webpage, and we also plan to, we're working on it, moving through time into next year, and maybe having something like brown bag meetings where some of the PIs or representatives for them that are conducting this long-term monitoring data may be available to give overviews of what snapshots of what they've seen and what they're doing. You know, we want to be as inclusive as possible, and that's our goal moving forward. Yeah, Louis.
Thank you, Steve. I see my friend Michael Huber is on here. And so I wanted to ask a question, and perhaps he can address it, or something. This is something we need to look at. As you remember, when we were crafting these MPAs, we had a lot of interfacing with the Department of Defense, and it was very important because we did not put MPAs on areas that the Department of Defense uses for training. And I just wondered how that has worked out, and how the areas that were evidently already protected by the fact that they were training areas, how has that worked out? Thank you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I was wondering. I've been having some operator error. My camera is terrible, so I can try it here, but it's yeah. All right. Well, you'll get the thing there. So anyway, hi guys. As far as the from our perspective, it's going pretty well, in the sense, I mean, as far as, you know, we've done everything that we, you know, said we would do as far as enforcement. We have safety zones as we had, and we you know, certainly, you know, track that, people coming and going, and we do participate in monitoring under our integrated natural resource management plans. So yeah, from our perspective, it's pretty well. That's why I asked the question of how the whole network was doing. But if you recall, you know, the safety zones were in the preferred size. I mean, they're very large areas, and we had really good control of them. So to the extent that that meets the biological goals of the MLPA, as you know, as far as the you know, the master plan goes, I from my perspective, it's been going pretty well. But obviously, I was more interested in this workshop and listening to see, you know, how others felt, and how the overall MLPA implementation is going. Over. Yeah,
Thanks, Michael, and thanks again for your participation in the planning process in Southern California. And what Michael was representing, was speaking about the safety zones. Those are out at the San Clemente Island. And because some people may have wondered, oh, hey, how come there's no protected areas out there? Well, there's these zones, and that was a kind of a give and take through the process that was agreed upon by DOD and the Fish and Game Commission. It worked out well. I just a random question for you, Michael. I live in off the Orange County coast, and I see all those container ships out there, and it must play hell with submersibles, I don't know, submarines or naval operations. I don't know, it must be a headache for the Navy with all those vessels anchored out there, but you don't have to answer that. But
yeah, that's kind of outside my area of expertise. I haven't heard anything internally having an impact on Navy operations. We also have our marine biologist on the line, Walt Wilson, may have some input on both of these discussion if you want to unmute him.
This is Walt. So I think most of the shipping activities, and the huge backlog of ships are pretty much outside of our area of operations. That they're not having any effect on the transit zones to San Nicolas Island and our air range. They're really too far north to have any effect on our San Clemente Island operations as well. And I just want to add to what Mike said about the San Clemente Island areas. We've had great success in enforcing, making sure that there's no fishing and everything out there. I suspect that the fecundity that that you will see, the increased fecundity that you'll see in MPAs along the coast will be the same out at the San Clemente training sites, which were probably already strong in the first place. We've also had some cooperation with the Coast Guard in helping us enforce, lobster fishermen. And I think, early on in the MPA process, there were a lot of fishermen who said, well, we'll take advantage of this, and went in there, but a couple of them got caught, and I think, and they paid the price for it. So yeah, we've had really good success out there. And I think, the way that worked out for the whole MLPA process in the military was very good. I also heard from one of the marine biologists on our staff who deals with contracting that there is some more studies that are about to be done in those areas that, in the very beginning, we contributed to the baseline studies that were done on the MPAs, and we have some more contracting efforts going to make sure that those two areas that we have out at San Clemente Island are included in future studies.
Thanks, Walt.
I mean, from a biological point of view, I guess the bottom line is that it does contribute to the overall biological goals of the network. And I think, they're good areas. We take care of them, obviously, for military reasons. It's not safe to enter those areas. But as far as what happens underneath the water, I mean, I think it's a very safe place for the fish. I mean, obviously, if you're in a boat on the surface of the water, it might be something different. But, they aren't certainly used for that. It's just more of a safety area. I mean, they're not actively used for, live fire or anything like that. I mean, on land there is, but sometimes, it's just not safe to be there. So I think it's really a win-win for both national defense and for the environment in this case.
Right. I'm seeing Dave Rudy's hand. Dave, come on across.
Yeah, Steve, I'm glad to hear that you guys are talking about inviting the scientists to participate with interested stakeholders. I think that's really important. There really needed to be more of that in the original process. And I think if it started on a ground level where, we can all have a chat and, like I said, brown bag lunch or however you want to call it, and try to learn from each other, I think that's great.
Yep. We hope to make that something we can do early next year.
We have just under 10 minutes remaining. If anybody we'd love to hear from people who haven't had a chance to either speak or write into the chat. If anyone would like to contribute anything, in the meantime, we'll hear from Louis.
Thank you once again. And those of you all that are involved with 30 by 30, and of course we've been following that and been involved in it as well. Keep in mind the part that the Department of Defense plays in protecting habitat, etc. I ran research boats off of the coast of California for 24 years and was always in contact with the Department of Defense. There are many areas that they restrict access at times when they need to, and the clearance from the Department of Defense is very important. So I hope in the 30 by 30, if anybody else is involved, that they will bring the Department of Defense in there, and I'm sure they will, but just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Yeah, I can speak to that if I'm still unmuted. Oh, how do I?
You're good.
Oh,
You're good.
okay. I can't tell if I'm muted or unmuted. Like I say, I have operator error. This Zoom will not work on a Department of Defense approved computer due to security reasons. So I have to use my personal device. That's why I had to go home. And that's why. But yeah, we're integrally involved in the 30 by 30. We think that we have a lot to contribute, both not only offshore, but on land. And we have tremendous, for safety reasons, again, large integrated natural resource management plan, areas that we manage all over the state. So as far as the Cal Biodiversity Council, we do have my boss, Jason Gillespie Jones, is on the actual Biodiversity Council, the DOD rep. Then on my staff, Garrett Smythe, who's my rep in Sacramento, is on the working group. And yeah, we fully intend to participate. And remember, there's a federal executive order also on 30 by 30. So I think, this state initiative is how we're, implementing 30 by 30 in California. So yeah, we tend to be a full partner in that, just like we were in MLPA.
Right.
So.
To be remiss, I actually didn't see in the list if we had any tribal persons, and I would have liked to call them up if they wanted to speak. I don't know if we do have any on here. Not if there are, not to put you on the spot, but feel free to weigh in too. Looks like all my screen's frozen. I don't know if everyone else is. It's a connectivity issue.
No, we have a quiet bunch here today. Some of the other meetings that we've been in over the last 2 weeks have, some folks have had more things to add. We do have quite a lot here that we've gathered in just this session. And, there are other thoughts being shared in the other regions as well at the moment in their various breakout rooms. So I think that what you all have contributed thus far has been really excellent. David, please go right ahead.
Yeah, appreciate it. Not to kill time, but just actually curiosity. I mean, there has been a lot that's come out here, and I think it's really helpful. I mean, the website's fine and good, and it's there for us, but are there any plans to share any of the notes or I don't know, just any of this with the group? I mean, protecting privacy and all that, of course, but how do you usually handle that?
Yes, so we will be. Oh, go ahead. I think Toba was going to speak.
Well, I was just going to pass that one over to Jocelyn because Jocelyn's team in Strategic Earth are going to be working very hard with all of their skills that they have in compiling all of the notes from not just this meeting, but the previous 3 meetings as well, and the various regional breakout rooms. So there's a lot of components that are going into all of the notes that are being collected. So the Strategic Earth team will be creating summaries. And so Jocelyn, if you want to talk a little bit about that, or I keep. Yeah.
Oh, sure, no problem. There are no plans to share out the direct notes. There are plans to develop a summary of themes that have come out through all of these discussions. And I think, and this might be one for Amanda, about reaching out to CDFW specifically for the recordings. And so I'll wrap up my spiel and hand it over to Amanda. There will be a summary of the discussions, but these exact notes will not be shared out for privacy reasons. Yes.
Thanks. Thank you.
And then in terms of the recordings, obviously there were multiple breakout rooms. So my job is to make sure that all of those breakout rooms get closed captioned. So if you need to rewatch the videos sooner rather than later, we can share a direct link with you if you just email either preferentially the MPA management review at wildlife.ca.gov. But if you email any of the leads for this meeting, we can make sure we can get you a link to the meeting if you need it. If you don't need it right away, like I said, they will be put up online at a later date once the closed captioning is taken care
of. One thing I was going to just add to the discussion too, thanks Amanda, is separate from that conversation is we've heard in the previous meetings about diversity, inclusion, the human dimension, and people asking for that to be as part of the report. And, you know, the Act itself does not directly address that, but we have not collected historically a lot of information on that, but that is definitely going to be in part of the report, and there'll be places where there'll be recommendations for where we can improve on that area. And so I just want to, if someone was thinking about that, that is something that we received actually in all the meetings, the groups that work, breakout groups that I've been in, and that is going to be part of the report. You know, there's not very many scientists that kind of just investigate this type of stuff. And it's big, it's become a very big topic, of course, in recent years. And so we've received input from the science advisory team that looked at our action plan and said, hey, you guys need to start looking at this type of information, seeing how the MPAs are affecting communities, place. And so that is going to be a part of our report. And it may be light on types of information we have, but there'll be most likely recommendations on how we can move forward in that realm. So I don't know if that was anyone's mind that they didn't want to bring up or hadn't thought about, but that is going to be part of the report itself.
Thanks, Steve. And just in the last few seconds here, want to make sure, Jennifer, you have an opportunity for your last question. And you're on mute. Oh, or maybe I'm just not hearing well.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Steve, I wanted to follow up on that. I mentioned collecting kind of human data in my earlier comments, but one of the more specific comments about that is collecting disaggregated data so that you can, because if you collect information about demographics, like even gender is often not collected, or zip codes of people where they live, or their education levels, or like race questions, or those types of things. Like if we collect that type of demographic data as a routine, is a part of all the other data, then you can always ask those types of questions about who's participating in MPAs or who's benefiting from them. So I think collecting that type of demographic data is fairly straightforward to do, but it can be really valuable for answering those types of questions. Thanks.
Yep, thank you so much. And the idea, one of the recommendations from the work group was to form a technical science team to help, develop and curate that type of information. So thank you so much for that last question. And I think I got a prompt here. It's these lead breakout rooms. So I think we have to move back into the main room. So thank you all for participating in this work group. We really appreciate it.
Really great information, everyone. We'll see you back in the main room.